Over the past 3-4 years, I've worked with a lot of SaaS slash B2C founders with monthly revenue MRR of as little as $2,000-3,000 a month, to the point of $100,000 a month, and even more. But I'd say when you cross $1 million in monthly revenue, you're no longer a small startup, or you're a startup that has some weight. And they come from all sorts of background. Some of these startups had funding, some of them were bootstrapped. The founder was putting in money, or the partners were putting in all their money. But there were some patterns that I think are very common amongst them, right? And when I was working with them, it was not very obvious that I needed this, that I was looking for these conversational patterns. But over time, when you meet founders again and again, things start striking out. And so in this video, let's focus on 6 patterns that I've found that I believe are almost universal to every successful startup or business, especially in the early years. Number 1 is focus equals faster compounding. What that basically means is one metric at a time, right? Instead of trying to track 10 different things for the business, most founders had one central thing that they wanted to focus on. And usually this was an activation percentage, right? And then they would focus on nothing for the next 3 to 4 months, just how to get more users activated into their SaaS platform. And activation, if you're not familiar with, just means a user that now knows how to use a platform. So for example, for YouTube, an activation metric could be watch 2 videos and search for a video. Just giving you an example, but if a user does this, they're very likely to come back to the platform. For TikTok, it might be watch 3 TikTok shorts. And if somebody does that, they're more likely to come back, versus users that never watch a short or watch only 1 or 2 shorts are very, very less likely to come back to the platform. So an activation percentage was almost central to almost all founders that I work with, right? And key here as well is that's their North Star metric. That's the metric that they track. So one metric at a time. 2 is retention before focusing on scaling or growth. What that means is the customers that they did have, not a lot of customers, very little, focusing on retaining them instead of trying to grow the business exponentially. What that meant was not focusing on paid ads, not focusing on paid channels, until you were certain that 70 to 80% of the people you're currently working with will continue to work with, right? Because if that's not the case, then you're just going to leak more churn out of the business. Imagine a bucket where you're filling in water with growth. There's so many leaks at the bottom of the bucket that things just don't seem to be healthy from a long-term perspective, right? In those scenarios, usually if you cut out funding, you cut out paid ads, the businesses usually plummet. So that was very important from the second point perspective, of focusing on retention, keeping the customers they had, right? This was a very common pattern I found time and time again. 3 was being very simple with onboarding, right? I cannot stress this enough. Don't overcomplicate things, right? When you're building a product, it's very easy to get blinded into the atmosphere you're building, and you become very there's a word for it I'm forgetting, but you become very immune to how complicated a product might get. And then you bring a new user into the picture, and the person doesn't know what to do, where to click, where to go. And it's just not a great experience, and they sometimes end up leaving. So simplifying the onboarding experience to be very simple was, again, something very, very common, right? And even within this, the most important thing was getting a user to a win within the first 3 minutes, right? Getting a user to their first feeling of aha, within 3 minutes. And figuring how to do that is not easy, and that's why a lot of time gets spent into that. Because remember, the longer someone uses the product, the less likely they are to leave because they've seen value from it. But if this user's completely new, you want to get them to their win ASAP. Number 4 is founder-led demos still matter. Put out, delay hiring sales teams as much as you can. Founder being present for demos, for leading initiatives still has a lot of weight. I've worked with companies where they're doing $200,000 a month in revenue, and the founder is still present in those sales calls, right? He might not be building the product, he might not be involved in designing the product or the solution, but he's still there for sales, right? And This is also great if you think about it from a customer perspective, right? Like if I'm a customer and I want to give you $10,000 a month, I want to talk to the CEO, the owner of the company, right? That's going to have a much better chance of converting than if you give me some sales guy who's just trying to, hit his monthly quota. And sometimes, not to take away from it, sometimes salespeople do care. Definitely, that's definitely the case for a lot of businesses, or some businesses at least. But I don't want to take that chance where some sales guy says something and then later on, engineers say, "Oh, we cannot do this, or we can't build this," and a founder comes in and he's like, "Oh, sorry, that was miscommunication," right? So whenever a founder is in the picture, the CEO is in the picture, I, as a customer, have more confidence, and that's just how the world works. Number five, obsession over cancellation, right? Trying to figure out why users cancel, right? Focusing in on what's keeping them retained, and if they're not retaining to the business, what did they not like, right? Just one or two points here as well can give you so much value in terms of product discovery, in terms of what to build next, in terms of what the customers did not like, right? And this is so critical if you want to grow your business, because these people cancel. There is a very high likelihood that whatever reason people are canceling for will not be the last instance of this cancellation reason. Meaning, more people in the future will come and cancel for the same reason. So it's very important to know: is it a competitor pricing you out? Are the features just not being used enough? Is it something else? This is, an art to master, and the more feedback you get here from customers, the better. And lastly, and this is very, I think, also important, is they have narrowed down ICP in their mind, like which customer they wanted to target, right? They weren't trying to build a product for everyone. And I think hopefully most founders or product managers already know this. If not, that's okay. But you need to have a physical working imagination of what your product or what your customer is going to look like, the person that's physically going to come in and imagine paying you with a credit card. What are their demographics? Where do they live? What do they do? How do you fit into their workflow, right? A product for everyone is a product for no one. And a lot of founders I met, especially the better ones, that were able to scale their businesses to past 50K MRR, past 100K MRR, they had this understanding that these are the industry. This is that within this industry, this is the niche I'm touching, and I don't go beyond this, right? And this is like my bread and butter. And once they establish themselves there, it's very easy to kind of go on to other companies within that niche, right? Word of mouth is also like a big proponent for sales down the line once you've established value for companies. So if you think about it, it's not really any sort of growth hack here. It's just discipline. That's at the end of the day what a lot of these founders had. Frameworks can help, but essentially it comes down to how disciplined the founders were and how open they were to feedback. Not getting distracted with a lot of different metrics, having one metric in mind and going forward with that. So if you like this video, please feel free to like, subscribe, and comment about your thoughts. If you're a founder, a product manager, or you're trying to get into the industry, what do you think are non-negotiables for people that are successful in this industry? Right? Ciao.